Hello, all you gridiron fanatics. Glad you could join us for the off-season edition of Gridiron Gab Pro Style, where we gab about all things pro football, from the scoops of the regular season to the scores in the postseason and the picks in the off-season. Let's start gabbing.
The autumn winds move like the thunderous waves of Neptune's sacred palace. And here, amongst the blackened soil, lies the ragged hands, worn, torn, and callous. They await with cunning and vicious prowess, for the warriors have returned.
Come on, Dutch! Don't do it! Woo! No way! Woo! 85! Crying out loud! You're making me, you're driving me nuts!
But behold,
Welcome back, you guys. Thank you for joining us yet again for this third edition of the off-season edition of Gridiron Gab Pro Style. I am, of course, Mr. CeeLo here, joining you. Here to talk to you about the 4-13 Washington Commanders. Well, it wasn't a total disaster on many fronts, but let's just bring it in, shall we? The Commanders were led by quarterback Sam Howell, who was coached by Eric Bieniemy, who is no longer employed there. But looking here, he had 3,946 yards passing. Impressive considering he had 21 touchdowns and 21 interceptions. But then again, you also have to look at the type of weapons that he had available to him. Of course, Terry McLaurin, being the great wide receiver that he is and borderline elite, had over 1,000 yards. But then it gets really fuzzy when you start looking at the other guys. So then you have to kind of ask yourself, what else do they have? Well, Logan Thomas couldn't stay healthy. And then you have really nothing outside of wide receiver, as Curtis. They really struggled to get a lot out of Curtis Samuel in the 4 seasons he's been here. And really it's been just Sam Howell trying to do his thing. And then you've got the running game, which was really non-existent because Robinson was not really great. And, looking at what Eric Bieniemy likes to do, you go back to his Patrick Mahomes days. He had a guy that could go down the field. McLaurin's a good down the field kind of guy, but he was so good at getting down the field. A lot of the times defenses were not going to allow this guy to beat him. And so there were struggles there with other guys getting open. And you're looking at a team that averaged 19.4 points a game. Now, I can see why Ron Rivera got fired, considering they gave up 30.5 points a game. That's not good. And you're only averaging 93.6 yards rushing a game, and you're averaging 245 yards a game passing. So now, is all of this on Ron Rivera? Well, you need help at your offensive line. That is one of the keys that I think the Commanders need to look at. A lot of people are going to say, go quarterback, go quarterback. I would argue that if I were the Commanders, and I understand this is a whole new regime with Peters and Dan Quinn. I get it. I totally understand it, guys. You have to make a splash, and unfortunately, I don't know if the Commanders can make a move of this magnitude and save the course of the season. I'm not sure. I'll put it like this. I don't believe they're going to be much of a contender, so to speak, guys. I just ultimately believe that Dan Campbell's going to be attempting to pull as much out of this defense as he possibly can. And I think along the lines is they're going to have to sign Cameron Curl back. You know, they've got over $73 million in cap space. They're going to have to deal, you know, with distributing that out, guys. As I said, you know, Peters is going to have to be on his P's and Q's big time, because ultimately this is not going to be a situation that is going to repair itself in a fast, timely manner. They're going to have to go about it slow. I don't know if Dan Campbell was the man for this job. You know, especially if you're talking about, like I was listening to a reporter on The Fan. He was talking about the best thing you can do if you're drafting a quarterback is to get head coach. And I think that's a trend you're going to see, guys. Ultimately, you get a coach in there that's going to build the defense, and you definitely need the offensive coordinator to be your head coach, you know, because he's the guy that's going to build this quarterback up if that's the route you go. So I totally agree with that, because I was not on board with that at first. But, you know, looking that you went and got Cliff Kingsbury, and more than likely, he's going to want his guy. And his guy being more than likely, it's looking more and more like it's going to be Caleb Williams. And I've been doing my own mock drafts and so on and so forth. I truly believe one of two things is going to happen. The Commanders are going to trade out of that pick instead of staying patient, which is what I would do. Because to me, Jaden Daniels presents more than Caleb Williams. As much as the talk has been about Caleb Williams being the consensus number one pick and the new incarnation of Patrick Mahomes, I truly believe that Jaden Daniels would be a steal if he's still available at number 2. And honestly, looking at what the Bears are possibly going to do, I don't see them staying with Caleb Williams. I think he falls right into the Commanders' laps, just as Cliff Kingsbury wants. But to me, it would make more sense if the Commanders just trade back. And I've had a couple of people say that they would take Malik Neighbors, and even possible that the Bears would take Malik Neighbors at number 1, which I think would be absolutely insane. If you can get this guy, you know, right now he's looking like he would be a possible 10th to in between the 8th and 12th pick, You could trade down and do exactly what you did, get a boatload of picks. And especially if you were to get that number 2 pick. But if I were the Commanders, the first thing I would focus on is this O-line. This O-line is not atrocious, but they're a step above being atrocious. You know, they have got to focus on getting this line better, and especially when you're only running the football for 93 yards a game. And I know a lot of people are going to say that's not horrible, but it's 27th. That's 27th, you guys. And the prospects of what the Commanders have, especially the way Dan Quinn liked to do things in Atlanta. Now granted, a couple of those years Kyle Shanahan was the coach. Now, you don't necessarily have to go that route. Okay? The thing I look at with the Commanders, this is just my opinion. They have to go and get offensive line help. Now, according to a source, you've got Jonah Williams and Mekhi Becton as guys that could be potential targets. Now, with both of these guys, Mekhi Becton, you could sign him on a 1-year prove it, because I'm pretty sure the Jets are not going to take a shot on him anymore. You know, that's one of those relationships that has been marred by injuries, and it's just kind of like, okay, you know, let's move on. And sign him on a cheap 1-year prove-it deal to see if he can handle it. And then there's Jonah Williams, you know, another first-rounder. He plays at Cincinnati, and he was moved to right side. He could also get a team-friendly deal after he was moved to the right side with the Cincinnati Bengals. So these two guys could very well be playing for a possible rebuild. But then you look at the guard and the center position. There's actually 2 candidates that I like here. Now, Washington, whoever they draft, is going to want to run the football. And the two guys that I like are going to be Kevin Dotson from the Rams and Jonah Jackson from Detroit. Now, these guys are not going to be cheap to get because they've been very successful where they are. Now, the Commanders have to be able to run the football. I don't care who they have under center. And I'm going to be honest with you. The Commanders have 2 draft picks in the second round. So if I were the Commanders, and they probably will not do this, I'm just going by what I would say. Well, I'm telling you guys what I would do if I was the Commanders. I would trade back that first pick, that number 2 pick, maybe not go any further than the 8th pick because you either want a shot at hopefully Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, or Rome Odunze. And possibly, now this is the catch, you want to get either an extra pick in this draft or you want to get an extra pick or 2 in next year's draft. You get an extra pick in next year's draft, it assures that you don't have to make this rebuild all about this year. But you have to understand what you're going to do this year. And part of this is rebuilding this offensive line and seeing what you can get and deciding whether or not if you want to take a shot on this deep tackle class, which in my opinion, I think you have to. I think you can trade back maybe 3 or 4 picks, maybe even instead of going back to the 8th pick, but you could trade back to about the 5th, take Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, and possibly get your guards out of this crew and possibly just get both your left and both your right tackle in this group. You could even go as far as say you could get your right tackle in the 3rd round. That's how deep this tackle class is. These guys are good enough to be right tackles, very good right tackles, but not quite as good to be your dominant left tackle. That's how deep this class is. But you could very well do that, and then this is what a lot of people will say, well, who are you going to get at quarterback? You could leave Sam Howell back there, and a lot of drafts are leaving Michael Penix Jr. out there. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be there now, but I will say this, it would be a huge gamble for Washington to take it. But I do think it would be worth the risk if they did leave him. I'll tell you like this, I'm a firm believer that there are guys in this league right now that have not had their fair shake. Malik Willis is one. Desmond Ridder was one of the few guys in that very draft class, and Kenny Pickett that have had their fair share. I'm a firm believer when you take a quarterback high in the first round, if he hasn't played any more than a full season or 17 games, not nearly as effective. I think Malik Willis has had a short, but that I'll get with that when we go to the Tennessee Titans. But anyhow, looking here, they need to add another weapon. And that's why I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. The one guy that I think is going to be a major, he's going to garner major attention is going to be Gabe Davis. The only problem I have with Davis is his ability to stay on the field. He has been a huge number 2 to Stephon Diggs. And there have already been rumors that they're not going to pay him top dollar. There's going to be a possibility that either they're going to... the Bills are going to look either into free agency or they're going to look to draft his replacement. But they need another big guy. Gabe Davis is a possibility, and possibly, this is a huge possibility too, you guys, they could, if a guy like Keon Coleman or Donnie Mitchell is still available at that position, they could take him. And then we look at, because right now the receiving core outside of one Terry McLaurin is really weak. It's really weak, and the Commanders have to address that. This is why I say even with a drafting of Caleb Williams or Drake May or even Jaden Daniels, they've got to get the quality of weapons that they've got to have. They've got to have these guys. They're going to have to make some decisions. Tight end is not going to be a big deal to fix in free agency. I think the draft class is pretty dry as well. Outside of Brock Bowers, you kind of have you don't have a real long list of guys that are going to be in this year's draft as far as tight end goes. You already have the possibility that Logan Thomas might not be back. I'm just saying Logan Thomas is a huge he carries a huge tag that would be valuable to the Commanders' salary cap. They would save $6.5 million. Now I know what people are going to say. Why would you care about saving $6.5 million? Well, the thing is, he's also 32 and he has been prone to injury the last couple of years. I mean, you look at outside of Brock Bowers, you really don't have a lot. Like last year was a total smorgasbord when it came to the tight end position last season. Outside of Bowers, you almost go to Jatavian Sanders, who's 6'4", 242. He's good sized kid. But then I look at Brevin Ford. He's 6'7", 270, but he's considered a late third, early fourth type guy. And I'll be honest with you, I like those big kids because they're very big red zone threats. Now, as I said, last year was so loaded, and the reality of it is you could get one here if you're really out there for it. If you're the Washington Commanders, which I would say Jadavian Davis is a guy that you could take, but it's not somebody I want to reach for. You really need to think that through before you make the move. But really on offense, that's what they're going to need. Now, I will tell you something. As far as the running backs go, this is where I'm looking at. You got looking at Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, and Derek Gore. Now, here's where this could get extremely interesting. Whereas the Commanders didn't do very much with Robinson, didn't do very much with a lot of players last year, such as Jamison Crowder. But looking here at the running back room, I'm just going to tell you, Gibson is a free agent. He'll be 26 years old. Now, you could bring him back. He did have a rough go at it this season. But this is what I would think if I am the Washington Commanders and Dan Quinn, because we all know Dan Quinn likes to run the football. So here's what I would suggest as the running to push the running game of the Washington Commanders. Now, a lot of people are not going to necessarily agree what I'm about to say, but this is what I would do. I would take a swing for either. Listen to me carefully. Derrick Henry. I know. Everybody's going to be like, they don't need a running back. Yeah. Now, you can keep Robinson. Robinson's not your, he's not Derrick Henry. But I would say straight up that this is exactly the kind of guy that you need with that $73 million. Ultimately, yes, if you take either Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, or Drake May, you're going to have to keep this money on the DL, because what's going to happen is you are going to have to pay this guy if he turns out to be the truth. But what you need to be doing is surrounding this team with the type of talent that it's going to take to make him better. And of course, that includes a running game to maybe the first 2 seasons. You have to have an efficient running game. Like I said, you go out and get your tackles. Tackles, possibly one tackle, possibly the other tackle in the first and third round. But, however, the Commanders also have to retain some of this defense. That was the other thing that I didn't like. They gave up entirely too many points. And this is where Dan Quinn's going to come in. And I know a lot of people are going to say that this makes no sense, and that makes no sense. Okay. Now, you could argue that you have your guys. Now, I think they're working on signing Cameron Curl, and Kendall Fuller is going to walk. Yes, you are probably going to need more than likely you're going to need another corner. Now, the importance to that is that you have to get a guy that is going to be a major contributor early. Now, I hadn't seen a lot out of Emmanuel Forbes. I was not nearly as enthused with Forbes as Ron Rivera was. So I hope he turns into the guy, but I just didn't see what made him, him to be the guy that they figured was going to be a first round pick. I didn't see what pushed him up there. A lot of people did. Maybe it was his speed. I don't know. But the most important thing is that Dan Quinn's going to have to do what he did in Dallas, is create a fast defense. He's going to have to create the guys and the guys around it. And I'll put it to you like this. I think a guy that they could sign and make this team special is going to be the guy that came from Charlotte, and that's going to be a free agent that could make is a Swiss Army knife. You could use him. I mean, you can use him exactly like he used Micah Parsons. People still don't realize Micah Parsons is a linebacker. And it was just a sure bit of luck that he stuck Micah Parsons on that defensive line when he had nothing else and turned him into a superstar. Now, you could do the same thing with Jeremy Chinn. Play him up as a big nickel. You'll not necessarily chasing the elite tight ends, but you put him up there with the illusion he is, and then you send him on blitzes because he's one heck of a tackler. That would be a huge improvement to this defense if they were to do that. And believe it or not, if you're looking at a lot of the stats here, being that they were ranked 27th in yards per game, and they had the 27th ranked defense against the run, and you just got to really start to analyze where the weakness in this defense was. It was pass rush. You can't stop anybody. If you can't stop the quarterback from throwing the football, what else are you going to do? And then your defensive line was really not that good when it came to making plays in the backfield. It was really a tough go at it for the Commanders all year, and that's not something that Ron Rivera is accustomed to having, is a lack of production from his defensive line, especially his linebacking core. That's something he specializes in. And you look here, you don't even have a single guy on this defense that has more than 7 sacks. Well, excuse me, you take out Montez Sweat, 6.5 sacks before he left. All you have is Jonathan Allen. And Montez Sweat had 6.5 sacks in 8 games. Not good. And then you got 2 guys with 2 interceptions, not even creating any kind of turnovers for this defense. So, with that being said, I ultimately think that the Washington Commanders need to really think about this move from quarterback. Now, I get it. Sam Howell's not pretty. But he gets it done. He threw this ball 612 times. That's 36 attempts a game, you guys. And you're talking about a team that hardly ran the football. I don't care how far behind you get, you have to run the ball. Now, some of that's Eric Bieniemy's fault. But the reality is they didn't have very good options at running the football. Now, I will say this. Brian Robinson did have 4 yards of carry, along with Antonio Gibson having 4 yards of carry, and even Chris Rodriguez had 4 yards of carry. But here's the reality. When you're playing from behind, you really don't have a lot of options. And when you have a lack of options when it comes to getting behind, you really have to go away from the game plan. You have to change it because you have to get back in the game. So, as I said, I believe that they need to pursue a lot of these young free agents that are out there. I'm not saying all of them, but I think the 2 biggest free agents they can get would be Derrick Henry and possibly Jeremy Chinn, and Mekhi Becton or Jonah Williams. You can get those guys, and I'm gonna be honest with you, the tackle position is probably a position they could solve in the draft. If you can't get the wide receiver solved in the draft, if you can't get the wide receiver solved in free agency, definitely solve it in the draft. That, to me, is the most important thing, because even with the guards that you can, Sam Cosmi can still be an effective guard, but you need to get the other guard situated. You need to go into free agency and get that one dealt with. And Dan Quinn could come in, and if he makes a move for Brian Burns, which I have a huge thought that he might do this, he might trade down and get a couple of picks to get him back in this first round, or maybe possibly make a move, give up the first this year and give up a second next year, or a second, because they've got 2 seconds. They could trade those 2 seconds, get right back in the first round. Possibly give up that first and get Brian Burns, and there you go. But honestly, I don't think Dan Quinn's going to do that. I think Quinn understands that even though Burns is 25, he knows his team is a long way from that. The teams that are going to be interested in Brian Burns are going to be teams that more than likely are going to have a lot of cap space and are trading it, or have 2 picks in this draft, 2 high plus 40 picks, and want to go with Brian Burns as a cornerstone for their defense. I'm not sure the Commanders want to do that. But I will say this, stranger things have happened. It's possible they could swing for T. Higgins if the Bengals choose not to franchise him. They've got a fair amount of cap space in their own right. But I think the ultimate thing is they need to get Cameron Curl re-signed. Kendall Fuller more than likely is not coming back. And they're probably going to have to dig into the market for at least one cornerback. Looking at the cornerback market, you got Adoree Jackson, who's 28 years old, but he's okay. He's not a guy that you could depend on. I think Jeff Okudah would be a guy that would be good. Now, a guy that's going to be interested, in my opinion, is going to be Chidi Awuzie out of Cincinnati. Now, we already know Cincinnati is going to use the franchise tag on T. Higgins. The question is, are they going to pay Awuzie, who's been a very good defensive back? We also can look at Levi Wallace and Steven Nelson out of Houston. But I got a feeling Houston's got enough money, they're going to seal that up. Shaquille Griffin was a great pickup for the Carolina Panthers this year. He's a guy that could be mentioned as a guy that could play here and there. And then they could go in and take. I would say if I were the Commanders, I would take a stake in Kendall Fuller again and give him a big deal. But then you've got Jeff Okudah, who showed some promise with Atlanta this year despite his injuries. But there's a lot of ways I would go, and you could possibly go. Kenny Moore's a guy. He's only 28. By the time the season starts, he'll be 29. But I think Awuzie is a guy that is a huge guy that could be here, and then you could pair him with, either, definitely not C.J. Henderson. You could definitely, pair him with Shaquille Griffin, and there you go. Or possibly Levi Wallace. You could give out 2 $10 million cornerbacks, and you still got $50 million to work with for guys like, guys like Gabe Davis. But you got to get that guy. You got to get that guy to go, and possibly even make a trade and get Mike Williams. Possibly, there's rumors that he might be out there. Possibly Mike Evans. We're not even talking about the one jewel that's out there that people are either shying away from for whatever reason. The only guy to have 10 back-to-back, 10 seasons of 1,000 yards his first 10 years. But that's gonna do it for the Washington Commanders off-season schedule 1.0. Guys, check me out at Facebook, Gridiron Gab Pro Style, and then also like and comment at the bottom of the show. If you have comments or you want to put your input as to what the Washington Commanders will do this offseason, as well as go to my Instagram and let me know what you guys think of Gridiron Gab Pro Style and the many other shows you've seen me on. But until the next time, you guys, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.
But behold, there is a warm breeze that comes from the west. The blazing sounds of victory fuel their everlasting quest. It is a call to arms, for they are here. An army that has the will to challenge and the will to dare.